you guys can go ahead and introduce yourself, starting on the very end.
I'm Lawrence Marcanich. And I'm Katie French. And we produced and wrote The Complex.
Hi, I'm Douglas Horn, and this is Dan Southworth, and we are the co-creators of Divergence. Hi, I'm Steve Surface, writer and producer of Before We Go to Sleep.
I'm Rob Ritter, director and co-writer of Between Jupiter and Mars.
I'm Kevin Tucker. I'm the director of Compulsive Love. We're usually talking about a low to no budget when you're doing a webisode. But we see that you can do them with quality. And so when you're planning your webisode, when you're sitting back and contemplating whether you're going to start shooting in June or December, are you worried about your budgets? Or are you worried more about your actors that you have in place and your crew?
For us, it's a tricky thing because you don't have the budget to secure and lock down schedules all the time. You're working with actors that you hope love your material first. That's what we started with, and you understand when they have to take a job that could help their career and or put food on their table, but that means your schedule's screwed. Part of what we had to do was build a contingency into our schedule where we could be a little flexible with people's schedules.
I think on that same note of just picking up a camera and crew, something related to the budget that we definitely work a lot with is just taking stock of the resources that we do have available, locations that are easy for us to access, so that we can really end up putting the money that we are able to raise to make the best product possible. So really making sure that we're even using that as sort of a creative limitation to push ourselves further into a story by using the resources that we do have to make a really great product.
Yeah, I think that's something we learned working on this. We wrote a very structured script for The Complex and kind of were locked into a 10-day shooting schedule that was very precise. And then we're working on something now that creatively we can adjust to any shooting schedule. So kind of shaping the story to something that's a little more flexible. And it's fun to work at it either way, to force yourself to really stick to 10 days of shooting and just be like, well, we're all free this weekend and we have a camera, so what do you guys feel like doing? So I think finding the balance between those two is kind of what's creatively fun about all this.
I agree with what's been said. I think it's to have a presence in new media, and it's also kind of one of the least expensive forms to get everybody working in performing arts. I mean, my casting crew are mostly film and theater people, and it was less expensive to produce a first season of what we did than it was to, say, produce a play in Los Angeles for 6 weeks, which could cost exponentially more when you're renting a theater from week to week. So it's less real estate involved is one reason.
Okay. What exactly is your intent behind making a web series? I mean, do you plan on getting rich? Do you plan on having this project outdo a major film company such as Paramount or any of those? Is it going to soar to the top and make you a household name? What exactly is your intent behind making a webisode?
But I think the reason we made the reason we made a web series is because we can't make a TV series. It's too expensive, and it's to go through those channels takes forever. So it's like getting in, and it's a way you can get in. It's a way you can be creative, and create something that can get a following, and then use that as a calling card, or use it to create more.
We did this mostly just to kind of keep fresh and keep making things. I like to try and make things as much as possible, and Adam Simquist, the writer, came to me with the script, and I thought it was funny, so we did it, and we're talking about doing the second season, and we're kind of, we're trying to figure that out. We don't know what the future is.
What I think these companies aren't really looking at is they're trying to direct what the audience wants. It's the same thing that studios do when they have the accountants greenlight a production. And I think that as the walls between the audience and the content providers fall more and more, where you sitting there, you can decide what's going to be made next because you actually really have an interest in it, is what's going to be successful. And everyone's going to keep trying to say, well, this worked here on that model, let's try and throw money in that direction. And that doesn't work.
I'm delighted that half my panel have been with me for a very long time, and the other half are new friends that I hope to be in their company for a very long time.
I have a question regarding distribution and numbers. If you're out there marketing your product and you're starting to get numbers, is there a magic number on the distribution end that we need to come to you with our content, with our subscribers and whatnot, that you would be interested in talking to us?
From my point of view,
Yes.
from my humble opinion, numbers do matter. So if somebody came to me and said, I have a digital comic book series that got 1 million views over, a couple months or whatever it is, then it's something that will, that I'll pay attention to. But then again, I'm all about the material, and I see a lot of original content that nobody has seen. Or something that's gone out digitally, but again, nobody has bought it. And it's great. And I know that it's great. And it's something that I want to pay attention to and devote the time necessary to help package and do the right way, bring in my distribution partners and my contacts to help support it. So again, it all comes down to the content. If you have great content, then it'll speak for itself. Eyes always help, but it's all about the content.
Well, YouTube, when they start taking an interest in you, usually it's upward, at least high 6 figures. In traditional broadcast media, that was one of the whole things about ITV, why it's all taken so long, actually, why we started the organization, because everything's so siloed, right? So you have your distribution, your technology, your content, your advertisers, and a lot of times their own incentives are at odds with one another. So it used to be that they wanted 25 million households. It was pretty high. When Nancy Dennis joined the ITA from Kraft, she had said she would rather have 10 million relationships than 100 million eyeballs. So it's all gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. So part of the numbers are you gotta get them just as high up as you can. So for the ad buys, because the advertising, or at least attract a sponsorship if it's a niche topic, let's just say, some kind of a environmentally friendly message or characters in your piece, right? And then some other sponsor that wants to be affiliated with that, the affinity group of people that are green, might come in. Then you start getting these ratcheted up conversations. Or you can try to be just some other piece of it that's either maybe controversial or going to attract attention topically, that can go viral through whatever your efforts are on Twitter and all your social media efforts. But the interest gets there either if you already have followers, if you get sponsored, even if it's a regional or local sponsor, or you get upwards into the millions. But the scale of what's counted as a channel really has compressed from where it used to be. Because broadcast TV, you had 200 plus million households, and you could have a share of like 70, which is unheard of now, right? So it's like smaller and smaller levels of people who watch. Even Mad Men, you'd be surprised how small the millions are that watch. It's not anything like it used to be.
She's asking how aggressively did you approach marketing your project prior to release?
I'll start. We did, I think, about 5 or 6 weeks of really, really hardcore. We had like a new trailer every week, twice a week. Even we had a lot of Twitter things happening. We weren't as integrated as some new media web series. Like Lizzie Bennet Diaries comes to mind. Is a really great way to use Twitter to tell the story as you market. So that wasn't really our angle with the complex specifically, but yeah, about 5 or 6 weeks. We had all the trailers, and then each character had a blog, still has a blog, that you can check out. We had a really fun party to get it going, and
the same way you call in all your favors when you're actually producing it, you call in all your favors when you're trying to get the word out there. And everybody has a community. We came from New York, and we're out here with a bunch of people we went to school with, and just called everybody we knew and made sure they were watching the trailers and sending the trailers out. And we know just a few people in publicity, and we're able to get it out. So it's just a, you know, when you build a little, that risk on risk, and you got like 4 soldiers, and then you just kind of make it get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's so tiny at first, and then you realize that someone you never knew could have heard about it. So it's just talking about it to anybody, and being that person in the room who will talk about it to anybody. So, but you start small, and then eventually you get a little bigger.
And a lot of times I find that creators are not necessarily always their own best spokesperson, to your guys' point. So sometimes if there's a person on your team who just is naturally more outgoing or has a real way with the pithy little words, that let them do the tweeting. You don't have to do everything yourself all the time. You might even have, you know, somebody in your family that's going to pitch in and help, depending on, you know, where you are in your budgeting.
The point is that the more that audiences can directly say, I want to see this, and make a vote for what they want to see, that's what I think is going to be the successful model. And it usually would have to be project for project. That's one of the reasons why I'm excited about crowdfunding, but at the same time it's getting a bad rap. Because when you get people who are millionaires who can afford to do it themselves, they should. But I do, when we were doing our project, the important part of it was to make the audience realize that we respect them. We call them our lunch crew. We said, we want to know what you think, and we want to keep presenting to you more and more so that they have an active participation, and then also stand up and tell people, I was part of something that I helped create. I think it's the emotional connection, just like a great movie. If you have a great movie, you have a great emotional connection with your audience. You can do that while you're building your project. And if you can get your audience to have that emotional connection, they'll give you the best marketing you can also get, which is word of mouth. They'll say, I was part of this, and be proud of it, and say, well, I also have some secrets that I know because I was part of it. And that's where I'd like to see a bigger model for what's going to work, as opposed to Yahoo throwing money in a direction of some major star who decides that they want to do a project and hope that it sticks.
So, you know, like you saw, there's a lot of filmmakers in the room. So you're saying that everything is sort of an audience engagement. That's how we're going to solve the marketing problem, because everybody here could create an awesome piece of content, but then there's 50 million other people that can create awesome content and throw it on YouTube. How do you cut through that white noise and kind of create signal?
Challenge is that the number of platforms, the number of avenues are just proliferating, and there is so much clutter. So the challenge is to break through that clutter and come up with new ways to do that. And it's going to continue to become a lot more challenging, because there are any number of additional platforms being added to the mix. Everyone is getting into content distribution, whether it's and content origination and distributing, whether it's Netflix or Amazon or whomever. And it's going to be a real challenge. That's going to be probably, in terms of monetizing content, that's probably the #1 challenge going forward.
And how do you not get lost in the crowd? I mean, when there's so much content out there, how can your quality product get out there when you don't have a studio or a network that's throwing millions of dollars behind promoting that show? That's the problem with so much content out there.
Question for Allison. You had this organization for 11 years. 11 years ago, what was anybody thinking about interactive television?
Yeah, well, actually there were trials of ITV back in the 80s, well, late 70s.
Really?
In the 80s. Time Warner did some famous trials in the early 90s. We had a Click to Buy, Pizza Hut, Time Warner Cable in Hawaii in the 90s. So a lot of those kind of things were already going on. They mostly were cable centric. So when we started, it was the multi-system operators. And then there's a whole ecosystem there, a middleware in the set-top box, which allowed for different transactions. So I think originally what everyone was thinking was a hardware solution, which is why I was saying the Laserdisc and CDI and all that early stuff. You remember all the old PC kind of based things, and then the living room, the set-top box, and then now, of course, it's migrated to what other devices you have that are also mobile and coming from the cloud.
Yeah.
And that's where all the business discussion is based, because it's really about using that back channel for a transaction, and it can be something else. It can be social interaction, that there's data that goes along with it. And so the argument tends to be, to these guys' point, who's paying for that, how are the brands supporting it, who gets to own the content versus the actual transaction and the data. And so for a creative community, the implication there is that all of you have to, if you are on the production side, producing side, have to be really cognizant of return on investment in a way that wasn't true back in the days when somebody else would take care of distribution for you. It's really kind of all that's all gone away.
One of the questions I have in this business is when you produce something and you're looking for a way to distribute it, and I'm talking about over the internet, through individual country sales, through television production sales, how do you know that you're going to get paid? And because in our industry, a lot of times media goes out there, it's stolen, it's taken from you, it gets distributed without you making any money on it. And that's kind of the area that I think everybody that's in this industry needs to have a return on their investment by knowing they're going to get paid for what their media is when it's sold, you know, when it's marketed, when it's viewed.
Yeah, I mean, graphically, I love the digital space in general. You know, I come from a household of comic book geeks, and I'm the type of kid who, you know, always went to the comic book store every Wednesday to buy my comic books. And because of the world that I grew up in, I'm so close to so many great creators and illustrators and writers out there. And in the digital space, you have so much more freedom to be creative, to do what you want to do. You have so many options now to exploit and distribute your content. And I'm just talking about literary content here. So with all these devices that are out now, from the iPad to the Nook to the Kindle to the Kobo, you know, through, you know, your laptop and desktop, through mobile devices, you have all these amazing ways to distribute your content now. And you can make that content so interesting. You know, instead of just picking up, you know, a book or a comic book where you see just the typical panel layout that, you know, we all have seen before, you can make this stuff interactive now. You can make it engaging. You know, you can hit such a wide demo that, you know, that material traditionally isn't accustomed to. And it just really opens up the floodgates. So with my company, you know, with Graphically, we not only work with, you know, thousands of publishers, we work with tens of thousands of independent professional creators who chose to distribute their content themselves without working with a publisher or giving up any rights. And as long as, you know, you have some marketing skills and you know how to talk up your product and do what you need to do to bring that spotlight to it, it's just such an interesting space, and that's where everything's going. And I think I read last week that that last month was the first time that tablets outsold laptops worldwide. And, you know, the direction that we're going in general, you know, I think is just going to give creators and, again, artists, illustrators, just so many more opportunities. And that's why I love that space. And that kind of goes into creative control as well, you know, from a production standpoint, from a creative, a development standpoint, when you're working in the digital space with companies like a Hulu or a Netflix or companies like that, you tend to have a lot more creative control than working with the traditional studios and networks out there. And from somebody who represents and options and controls source material and underlining intellectual properties, and somebody who's close with those creators, I love that creative control.
There's a lot of conversation these days, and I'm sure you guys see it, about sort of content everywhere. and the barrier of entry is very low. I mean, with applications like Vine, almost anybody can become some kind of filmmaker or content producer. And I want to open it up to the group here and find out, like, is that necessarily better, that content is everywhere and everybody's creating it and everybody has an opportunity to maybe or maybe not get their project, their art seen by the world?
Well, it's wonderful that we have the opportunity to get a project seen by everyone. So I mean, that's an obvious statement that you definitely want to see your project. But at the same time, I look at things that are on YouTube, and you have people that have 150 million hits, not 150 million, 1.5 million hits, to something that's their dog catching a frisbee. And when you have people that are working on telling stories, I'd like to see more of a separation between the two, so that when as filmmakers you're going out to tell a story, your stories are not clobbered by the next dog with a frisbee.
Yeah, I think we're actually in the last phase of kind of a golden age of that creative control, because of course it's all getting aggregated by the big players. I mean, once you have YouTube and having maker studios and then having VidCon and starting to buy channels and all that sort of stuff, it's like anything else. You got your rebels, they get in there, people do well, and then big business moves in.